So, hi, Duncan. Thanks very much to agreeing to do this interview. I'm really looking forward to hearing some nuggets and a few stories from your experience.
Azari, great to see you, and I hope I can be at least a little bit interesting.
I'm sure you will be. I know a little bit backstop, so I'm sure you will. So let's kick off. Tell us your role in the company and how you got there.
Well, I am Duncan Wales. I'm founder CEO of Tellimer, which is a platform for research and data in emerging markets. So it's a professional tool in the information services space. Believe it or not, it's very, very difficult to find the right information to invest in the emerging economies. And when I say emerging economies, I really mean all the countries in the world that are not in the G7. So about 180, give or take, of the countries in the world, most of the people, most of the geography, most of the natural resources, and increasingly interesting companies, interesting sovereign issuers, and they're all borrowing more money and investing more money. And we're trying to make that process much more efficient for everybody involved.
Brilliant. So tell us a little bit more about what is the actual service that you give, because that's a phenomenal ask of such a wide range of countries.
Yeah, so effectively what we do is we take our own research. So we do have our own in-house economists and analysts. But armed with that expertise, we have third-party data, third-party analysis and research, and we pull it all together from multiple sources and we surface it up through a platform. We also host a lot of webinars and events, and we take clients with us to meet the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, in the spring meetings and the main meetings in the autumn. So we're trying to be the single point of information access for these developing or emerging economies. And sometimes the best information that exists on a particular subject may have been written by a very clever person in Indonesia, and it may only exist as a PDF on an email. Now, because we have a global network of relationships, and that's really because of the long expertise we have in the firm, although we are a new firm, we can reach out to those people, we can ingest their information, we can distribute it where it needs to go, where it's going to be useful, and we can also digitize it and use AI to allow our users to ask natural language queries of what would be basically unscrapable, undiscoverable information, and then get a very clear written answer with backlinks to the relevant underlying sources of that data. So we're trying to make the whole analytical process much faster, more efficient. We're trying to power up professionals as they make incredibly consequential decisions, multi-million-dollar decisions. We're trying to equip them as well as we possibly can to do that. And that's with information that is currently completely invisible. So it's invisible to the web, it's invisible to all of these Gen AI tools that we keep hearing about, ChatGPT and things like that. And or it's buried or incorrectly structured, and we can solve all of those technical problems, as well as on some subjects having our own analytical perspective and making sure that we make that available to people when they need it.
And it sounds genuinely unique. As you said, you can't just get a little computer in my bedroom and use some AI tool and just nick all the sort of information you're getting. It sounds like you've got human to human sources that you can't
Yeah,
just nick off an AI app.
no, exactly right. One of the things I kind of thought when we set the business up was if I could take 30 years worth of industrial experience, people who'd literally lived through and worked through the financial ups and downs and sideways of the last sort of 30, 35 years in the emerging economies, and then I could get state-of-the-art technology and very clever technologists and mold those two together, we could really create a conduit for intellectual and financial capital that would go backwards and forwards and create greater investability into these economies, create greater transparency, ultimately government accountability and corporate accountability. Transparency has this sort of disinfectant effect. but it means that investing and raising money becomes easier for everybody in that whole process. And in fact, it should democratize that entire process, albeit within the professional sphere. You know, it's not going to be individual people that are going to invest millions of dollars in,
True.
you know, growing companies or countries, but it may well be big investment houses, you know, big financial organizations, and sometimes other governments as well, trying to make those direct investment decisions themselves, or even supranational organizations like the World Bank or its sister organization, the International Monetary Fund. And all of those types of clients are using our platform to make those very difficult decisions.
Truly big clients. So what was your particular path to this discovery, this business? How did you get where you got?
Um, that's a that's a good question. I sort of part of me feels like I have this sort of slumdog millionaire, just lucky components that all happen to fall um, into the right place at the right time. You know, I've been fortunate. I've done lots of different things in my working life, but one of them, I hate to say it, 25 years ago, was being part of the original management team of a firm called BrokerTech, which was an
Mm.
electronic trading platform for government bonds. So, you know, governments borrow money, believe it or not, and lots of money, and they do so by issuing bonds, which banks and investors end up buying. But they also, the big banks, when they invest in these things, they end up trading them between each other. Now, that business had existed for a long period of time, but it was mainly done by telephone. So literally, lots of computers involved, but literally people phoning each other up. And we built an electronic trading system so the end users could literally buy or sell online. Now, that doesn't sound very revolutionary because all of us as real people, as sort of retail people, we can buy shares with our phone. When you know, we can
Mm.
buy £5 of a company, you know, if we can buy £5 of Apple or $5 of Apple, you know, now. And that didn't seem so revolutionary. It doesn't feel revolutionary to us. But in those days, with government bonds in very big size, it was revolutionary. And the thing I learned was when you use technology to solve a problem, you aren't just replacing the old way of doing things with the new way of doing things. There's not a one-to-one conversion.
Mm.
When you build a piece of technology that really does what it's supposed to do, if it has, as we would say, product market fit, which is a sort of fancy way of saying, does it actually work for everybody? Does it solve a problem for everybody? Um, you end up creating entirely new dynamics. You actually have a sort of creative, transformative power of using that technology. And that idea of transformation and creation and democratization and efficiency and making things that were not an option for various participants. I couldn't
Mm.
possibly, if even if I'm a big company, some of the big companies in question, I can't possibly invest in these assets. It's too difficult, it's too expensive. I have to have lots of bank relationships. It can get very difficult and expensive. And we made that in our entire process much simpler for everybody involved. Um, and so that transformative idea kind of stuck with me. And then over the years, I ended up running a variety of other businesses, including one that was very much focused on emerging markets. I'd worked at EM-focused banks as well. And it struck me how very, very difficult it is for a professional working in emerging markets to make those multi-million dollar decisions. It's
Mm.
painful and it involves research landing in your inbox in such great quantity that you can never read all of it. You're trying to filter things out using your email inbox. You run models on Excel. You have lots of them open all at the same time. You might have multiple different other fantastic tools like Bloomberg and Haver and all these other wonderful platforms, which are great. But you might have 11 or 12 systems or platforms open at once just to analyze one credit one
Mm.
sovereign or corporate issuer or a company issuing shares. And it's very, very slow and very, very difficult, even armed with some of these fantastic tools. And so I thought if I can take some of the manual processes and manual collection and manual, slow, difficult things that very skilled professionals are spending their time on and give them that time back, but also give them information that was very difficult for them to find, difficult for them to process, impossible for them to visualize or compare. If I can just let them do what they need to do best, there is an odd-shaped gap between all these other great systems that are already out there that we could kind of fill with an odd-shaped service. And so,
Yeah, yeah, well,
as I said,
brilliant.
sort of the realization it was much more difficult than it looks, and that we might be able to do something with the combination of expertise and technology.
No, absolutely brilliant. As you said, a very potentially complex set of things that somebody's got to do that now can just come to you and say, "Can we just pay you a fee and you just do it all for us?" And it's absolutely sounds brilliant to
Yeah, they
me.
get access to the platform and they have all the right information in the right place in the right shape, and a load of information they didn't know was there in the first place, and it will speed them along on their professional decision making.
Absolutely. So, what would you say is your biggest learning or learnings as a CEO? Must be many.
There are many. All the worst, most negative things, of course, spring to mind first. All the mistakes, um, of which I've made many, but the biggest learning that was painful to learn was focus. Now, easy to say, hard to do, partly because when you're setting up any business, you start with one idea and it can be quite vague and you tighten it up and you think you're on the right track and then you adjust and then you experiment and creating something from scratch is very, as any entrepreneur, anybody who's run any business or anything, you can be making cuddly toys from home, or as one of my sisters-in-law did, setting up a baby grow business from home. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It is really, really hard to get over that initial inertia and really find your product market fit, figure out what your idea has to be exactly to match what people need and what will really make a difference to them. And we built, in the early phases of Tellimer, we built amazing AI tools and we were drawing out unstructured data from structured data from unstructured stores, primarily image files, PDFs. We had amazing technology for finding and distributing research around the place. And they were all really good ideas and possibly would have worked on their own. But we were trying to do too many things at once. And we went through a really painful process of having to decide what we weren't going to do. And deciding what you're not going to do is a bit of a superpower if it helps you really, really focus on what you are going to do. And in our case, it was, we'll start at the beginning. We know our client is a very, very specific persona. So we'll build it really for an emerging markets professional, they sitting inside a big investment firm, professional analyst or portfolio manager. So literally the people who make the investment decisions for the fund. And so they're a very skilled, very well equipped, but very busy, and very, very specific client. And we'll build for that. And then we fully expect that it will be useful to lots of other people as well. And we can learn more about those other users and we can help build more and more things for them. So every time you think you've focused enough and been specific enough, usually at the beginning of a business, you have to go back again and be more specific and more detailed and just really, really figure out where to begin. And then the world opens up to you a little bit. But that was a painfully learned lesson.
And was that over a number of months or even longer?
I wish it was months. The problem with bad mistakes is they take ages to play out. Um, look, we built some really amazing things, but we had to effectively abandon them, and that was a really difficult thing to do. But by stopping doing a couple of things, we had a couple of really exciting projects that we stopped. It gave us this immediate, not quite immediate, but really very, very quick result in terms of the uplift in performance of the core emerging markets platform business. You know, we had bitten off more than we could chew. There's a pretty big difference between what you can do and what you should do. And so we
Mm,
were working nights and
point.
weekends, and we were,
Yeah.
as we used to say, we have a lot in the lab. We had a lot of things that were experiments that we were running, and we just had to stop it and go back to the beginning and get really super laser focused on the core proposition. And then you discover there are more and more problems for you to fix, and it
It's
will keep you
interesting,
busy.
Duncan, because you get people like Stephen Bartlett comes out with it. Michael Jordan, the basketball player, he said, I missed more shots than most people, but I took more shots than most people. That's why I was so successful.
Yeah.
So some people say you have to fail enough to succeed. So it might be painful, but is it part of a growing process in a technology business? Is it? Do you think you could have shortcutted it? It's very difficult. Is it? So everything's easier in hindsight.
You ask a really good and interesting question, and it's a hypothetical I've run through my head many times, which was, I wish you hadn't screwed it up. I wish you'd kind of hit the ball first time. But, you know, now I'm a bit further away from, you know, the frustration of having invested months and months in building things, only to effectively put them on the shelf. In fact, one we sold to a client, which was great because we thought it was a good piece of kit. But um, if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have seen this really big, you know,
Mm.
transition and this big, you know, growth that we are still on. Um, and that's because we wouldn't have had the time, the focus, the bandwidth to get onto it the right way. So it's definitely improved me in my role. It's definitely improved me probably as a human being. Um,
Wow.
well, I had an old army friend who once said to me, "Suffering is good; it makes you humble," um, which is quite a stoic way of thinking about things. But I think an element of that is true. Painful at the time, but if you're lucky, you can look back on it and say it was useful to you.
It was useful. Yeah, interesting. So, what does somebody like you daily routine look like? I mean, obviously, there's so much variety in different business leaders, but is there a typical day, or what does a day look like?
Yeah, I mean, I can have very different days, but if I'm, as I'm most of the time, I am in London, I get get up maybe a little bit less early than I used to, but pretty early. I get up at sort of 6-ish, um, and I do some exercises. I have a like you know, I'm a uh, ex-sportsman, so I have quite a few and the army, sort of quite a few bumps and bashes and broken this, that, and the other to contend with. So I do some exercises first thing in the morning, walk the dog, have a black coffee, go to work. I amuse my colleagues by having a bowl of oats made with water into a porridge, which I let go cold. So it's a really horrible gelatinous blob. And my younger colleagues say to me, "Why are you doing that?" And I say, "Because it gives me something nice to look forward to by having something horrible at first thing in the morning." Um, I try to walk briskly. I'll have lots of meetings with clients or colleagues, and then you know try not to eat and drink too much in the evening. But that depends if we're out with clients or what have you. So I mean, if I'm traveling, as I will be shortly for the IMF meetings, where we're taking about 160 clients to meet the relevant teams that look after various countries at the IMF. Um, that is crash bang wallop. We are basically working or we're asleep. By the end of those IMF and World Bank meeting weeks, everybody involved is completely exhausted because you have a breakfast meeting, series of meetings, a coffee meeting, series more meetings, a lunch meeting, more meetings, a drinks meeting, and maybe a formal drinks event, and then maybe dinner with clients, and then you have not enough sleep, and you repeat the whole thing. Yeah, so I think I'm feeling my age a little bit on some of those trips.
No, well, it's good. It's well, 160 clients. That's no mean feat there. It's phenomenal. So, what's the first person that comes to mind when you think of success?
I suppose I think of success in two ways. There's people who have like a successful event, like a pivot moment,
Hmm.
and then people who I think of as successful over their career, over their lives. So there are sort of people who sort of catch the wave perfectly at a pivotal moment. So I don't know why Sam Altman springs to mind, um, but Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, which are the guys who built ChatGPT, thinking of
Mm.
sort of generative AI. He got the whole generative AI issue front and center in everybody's minds. Even, people who are not involved in technology world have heard of ChatGPT. Whether it really works out and whether it has the desired effect is a whole different discussion. But, you know, potentially successful, maybe jury's out. We'll see. And then again, I'm not sure he was a good guy, but Hernan Cortez, the guy who invaded what is now Mexico, Spanish conquistadors, they changed the world for good or ill in a matter of months. And so successful, horrible, exploitative, but kind of pivot event. And then the other person I think of as successful, and it was just because it's in my mind, is Jasmin Paris, who's a young British woman. I think she's a mother as well, who is one of the very few humans ever to complete the Barclays Marathons, which she did last year, which is this very extreme off-road um, sort of running race in this extreme endurance race in the US. But you're not even running on tracks. You're running through thick undergrowth on steep-sided mountains.
Wow.
It's completely mad. And lots of men didn't complete it, but she did. She was as a sort of single event of human willpower and determination. That was pretty impressive. And then thinking about career successes, um, I think there are all sorts of interesting people out there. Again, the person who sprang to mind when we were talking about lessons learned is Jeff Bezos. Again, whatever one thinks about him, he was very consistent from the beginning. If you go back and search on YouTube
Mm.
for things he said, prepare to be misunderstood. He said, people thought I was running an online bookstore for a long time, and why are you doing that? And it won't matter. And that was never his plan. And he's a really interesting person who's succeeded over a long period of time with a clarity of thinking. And then sort of heroes of mine like Marie Curie, super clever, physically and morally brave, um, ultimately sacrificed herself for her endeavors. Just an amazing human being. And
Mm.
then the other person I was thinking of recently, who I really don't, I still feel I don't really know enough about, is the writer, thinker, abolitionist Fredrick Douglass, who was a man who's a enslaved person in the US who ended up being friends with President Lincoln and influencing his policies on a number of important issues, but had therefore grown up as an enslaved person before the Civil War and saw the Civil War and its aftermath, not all of which unfortunately was positive, but was one of the most influential people, thinkers, political thinkers and orators of that era. Yet is very sort of, most people who know anything about that sort of era in the US will think of, President Lincoln, but they don't
That's
necessarily
right.
think
Yeah.
about him
Yeah.
and others and the complexity and all the sort of talented people who were there making the difference. So look, as I say, I think about some people who kind of
Yeah. No, very
achieve
interesting.
a great success, and then other people are successful in a longer
But
way.
what's good is the examples you give demonstrates to people that success is depends on what you call success is. Success in human stories, the society, personal careers, business success. There's a lot of different definitions of what success is, which is really interesting. Because some people just say, when I think of success, I think of people who are rich, for example, maybe, or a politician who's become a president or something. But actually, as you said, there's people in history that just do phenomenal things that can really inspire you. I mean, how many people would have heard of the lady who did the marathons? Not many people might have heard of her, but very inspirational if you did
Yeah, I
read
mean,
about her story.
it's just a bit of sport at the end of the day, but she's worth Googling because Jasmin Paris, yeah, I mean, just the exhaustion on her, she collapsed at the end, absolutely
I can
exhausted.
imagine. Yeah, I'm
Amazing.
feeling like collapsing just thinking about it. I know Goggins. Have you heard of the?
Yeah, Goggins, yeah, we like him. I mean, he's gone a bit too far, but I think he's beginning to pay, his body is beginning to pay the price of all his
You
crazy.
can't hurt me, but in the end, might start to hurt.
I think so. I mean, he insists on, he was US Marine Corps, wasn't he? So he insists on taking his shirt off and running everywhere, lecturing everybody to camera. But he's
Yeah,
quite entertaining.
he's very entertaining. Swears a lot as well.
Well, there you go. You can take the man out of the core. You can't take the core out of the man.
Yeah, I used to listen to one audio book on the gym. He's swearing all the time. Um, what about the next few years, the next 5 years? Where do you see the business? Where are you going?
So look, we're still comparatively early. We were founded in 2020, and I think there is a lot for us to do. So over the next 5 years, I think we have a really exciting growth journey. Um, I think we can do a lot more. I mean, one of the problems we're trying to solve is even when there is information, it's incredibly difficult to filter the noise. In fact, one of the problems that technology has given us all is too much information. And getting what you want or what you need when you need it is a really complicated information management challenge. And yeah, we use a lot of AI. One of the things that we kind of overdid a little bit was trying to build too much of our own AI. Now there are sort of modular tools that we use to reinforce the AI that we do build ourselves. And so we can plug in third-party LLMs, large language models, which are basically translation slash, understanding of what's publicly available and
Hmm.
sort of conveying it back to you in words that humans understand. But that doesn't do very much. Um, so, for instance, what we do within our system, which is completely closed to people who are not subscribers to it, is we have a way of identifying proximity between data and ideas, and then we convert it using an LLM into language to answer a question. So it means that you can go into our system and you can ask an incredibly complex question that typically you could only ask an analyst. And if we have anything in our system that is responsive to it, it will give you an answer in writing and the backlink to the relevant citation so you can read the underlying information as well in a sort of shortcut sort of
Mm.
way. So that's just one element of what we're doing, but it's just, I know it's there, I can't find it. Because sometimes, I say to my own colleagues, my own analysts, I was talking with a client who asked a question about, what's your view on, the Ghana restructuring or whatever the question was. And I asked my chief economist, and he said, well, my view hasn't changed since I last wrote a deep piece of analysis on it 3 months ago. Now, without the technology, you have to have that relationship, ask the question, are you free for coffee? Remember Ghana, restructuring, where do you think we are? What's going to happen? Oh, well, I wrote something. Oh, can you send it to me? Yeah, I'll send you the PDF. You can see how the world has moved from a relationship world
Mm.
in the broader sense. We all need relationships, of course, but particularly in investing in financial services, you literally had to have all that happen to get the answer. Now, it can be 2 o'clock in the morning in Antarctica. I can get the answer straight away. I know
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
my chief economist thinks because he's already told me. And I can find it and I can remind myself and I can shortcut that process. And I still, want to go and turn up to one of our events and ask questions and have those human interactions. But I can also get what I want when I want it really quickly.
Mm.
And so that's just one example, but there's a big information overload problem as well as an accessibility and finding problem.
Yeah, that's a good segue for us to talk about AI. Because AI, you've talked about it a bit. Is that going to make a big difference to your industry in the next 5 years?
I mean, if I sort of categorize our world as a professional B2B, business to business information services, AI is really kind of what we would call table stakes. To be credible in the space, you have to be basically doing something with it right now. The most obvious thing to do is enhanced search, along the lines of what I was just illustrating. But yeah, for the big organizations who provide information and insight and data to big organizations, it's kind of in the realms of must have because otherwise they will get outperformed very quickly by comparators or competitors. So it will definitely have a transformative effect. I mean, one of the interesting things about AI that we've been playing with, experimenting with, and looking at pretty hard is it's incredibly powerful for what we need it for, in as much as for memory and information and correlations and patterns analysis with hard bits of data. AI is brilliant and it can do things faster and quicker and with better memory and better information than people can often. Um, and that's just because computers are good at doing those sort of things.
Mm.
However, on the what people talk about as uh, generalized intelligence, artificial generalized intelligence, AGI, you might hear people talk about or write about, getting a bit of AI or system to understand what a 6-year-old child can understand in a puzzle or a game or there's actually a bunch called the ARC Prize. If you look at arcprize.org, they have a little test where you have to fill in squares and it's pretty easy for an intelligent 6-year-old child to complete that test. It's nearly impossible for AI to complete that test. It's very difficult. I think I think I'm trying to remember where I saw it, but it was something like 20% success rate on some of these puzzles from the best AI in the world. And this
Wow.
best AI in the world can pass the bar exam in New York. Okay, so for acts of memory and mechanical must know
Yeah,
and dates
factual
and times,
information and
and
that. Yeah.
AI is brilliant. For operating like a human being, it is miles away. So the reason, when we're talking with our clients and you know, trying to figure out what we're going to build, we think of AI very much as tools. It's a toolkit. It's our servant. It's ignorant. We have to tell it what we know before it knows how to answer the client. We have to fuel it with research and data well, we've got research from 71 providers around the world. So, back to my example of maybe the best, most knowledgeable person wrote something on a PDF, on an email months ago, and that's still the best answer. We can find that for you. But
Mm.
um, that's where I think AI is. arguably, back to Sam Altman and OpenAI, I think the Gen AI craze has actually potentially slowed up the development of AI models because everybody is now busy catching up using the state of the art, the existing models, and trying
Yeah,
to make
yeah.
money out of doing that and trying to build things using that. And there isn't a lot of money going into research, I don't think, because
Interesting.
it's so we might be at a bit of a stutter point where we use what we've got a bit better and it will improve all the time, no doubt. But part of me is quite skeptical that we will get to any form of genuine AGI, anything resembling intelligence as opposed to information management anytime particularly
For a
soon.
little while, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting.
or at least I hope so, because I think regulation hasn't caught up. Governments don't and policymakers don't really know what to do yet. I don't think it's a bad thing to slow up a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and just make sure we're building tools that we have full control over.
Absolutely. So we're winding down a bit. I've got just some light questions for you mostly now. What book recommendations would you make, or audios, or videos, whatever you call them?
What to read or to listen to?
Yeah, to read or listen to, because some people prefer audio, some people prefer videos, some people still love books. So
Well, I'm not allowed to do a plug, am I?
yeah, go on.
The Emerging
Why not?
Markets podcast by Tellimer. I mean, some of it is a bit technical, but we have some really interesting speakers on the podcast who talk about big issues and the changing world. I always used to. I didn't really like the um, term emerging markets. It kind of pigeonholes a huge, diverse number of economies and societies and cultures into a single blob, which is really completely upside down. Um, uh, but the world is a big, fascinating place,
Yeah,
and
definitely worth a listen.
we try to capture some of that. In terms of books, I've read a really good book, just finishing it now, called The Plague Cycle. Not a terribly cheerful title, but is written by a chap called Charles Kenny, and it's very timely. I think he started writing it before the pandemic, but then finished it in the pandemic. And it is literally the history of society and its management of diseases. And it
Wow.
sort of makes you think about really big picture, long-term, big picture stuff and how disease has shaped our society as much as we've in some ways shaped it. A lot of bacterial diseases, well, touching wood here, um,
Hmm.
we basically have eliminated them, but viruses we haven't. I think there's only one virus that humanity has actually got rid of, which is smallpox, and that took 200 years of
Wow.
inoculations. And then, I was talking with some scientist friends a while ago about fungi, and they said, yeah, funguses can't really live very well in the human system, only at the periphery, in cooler body parts. Um, but if funguses learned how to tolerate human temperatures, they would be incredibly dangerous. So that was cheerful. Anyway, Plague Cycle it is, and it's not as gloomy as it sounds, and it's actually very, very interesting.
Interesting book, yeah.
And the other thing, and I'd never read it until quite recently, is an old book written, I think, probably in the 40s or the 50s by a guy called E.Newby, and it's a short walk in the Hindu Kush. And
Oh.
it's not a particularly long or dense book, but it's E.Newby leaves his job and with a friend drives through Central Asia and they go hill climbing or mountain climbing in Afghanistan. And so it's about Afghanistan after the Second World War. It's about relationships. It's about, you know, doing funny, silly things. It's about travel. It's just quite an
Interesting.
interesting
Short walk in the Hindu, what is it? Bush?
Kush,
Kush.
Hindu Kush. Yeah.
Kush. I thought you said Kush, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you sometimes you get surprised that you sit there and you think, right, this business owner is going to tell you all these business books to read, but sometimes, as what's interesting with so many people is actually your book choices could be totally random things that are just interesting. Not necessarily about business specifically, just interesting to you, which is
Yeah, I mean, I guess actually just to bounce back to your question about learning things, I've listened to Stephen, what's he called, the marketing guy,
oh Bartlett, yeah,
Stephen Bartlett, who's great. I think he's super smart, really interesting, um, really successful. I've listened to his podcast a few times, and I think they're interesting. But at the end of the day, when you are on the entrepreneurial trail, it's it's a bit of a lonely project, and only you and maybe your co-founder or founders are really on that trail.
yeah,
And you should definitely try and find fellow travelers on the road on their own parallel tracks and get
yeah,
some friends and allies. But at the end of the day, you have to follow your nose, follow your instincts. You are the only person who will really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. You are the only person who really, really understands your business. It's fine to, listen to other business how-tos, and it's great. We're always thinking about comparative businesses and other people's experiences. It's useful, of course, but it only gets you so far. The thing that will get you the furthest is you. And,
yeah,
that's your friends, it's your family, it's having a laugh, it's listening to music, it's having a hobby, it's thinking about just different things. All of it, if you have
it
your
all
eyes on,
contributes, doesn't it?
is
Yeah,
open. Yeah, adds to your thinking on things.
absolutely. No, you need to. I'm going to have to send this to my son to listen to. Learning is it just helps every type of learning.
And
Um,
sometimes it's the most unexpected things that will trigger an idea in my mind.
absolutely,
And I walk into the office and say, guys, I've got an idea.
absolutely, could come from anywhere.
Yeah.
Here, I've got an idea for you. If I gave you £100 million to invest in business, what would you do with it?
Ooh, I think there are loads of really exciting businesses out there. I've got a sort of few friends and contacts who are doing really fantastic things where they're basically, without challenging existing structures, they're trying to make everybody who participates in anything have a better time. There was a bit of a phase in tech businesses where everything had to be a disruptor. You
Yeah,
have to aggressively disrupt something. It's like, I think sometimes structures exist because they're actually quite a good idea and because it kind of helps. So if, there's a lot of new businesses. So for instance, I've got a friend who set up a business called Loop FX, and it doesn't disrupt anybody. It literally just makes the process for asset managers and banks who are buying and selling currency between each other. So asset managers trying to hedge their own risk exposures with their own own relationship banks. It just makes the whole process of price discovery and execution simpler. It just like takes operational pain out. And
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
very technical specialist
yeah, yeah.
activity, but they're building something which is just a good idea. And so there are loads of businesses out there that are just really good ideas that I think, with my hypothetical $100 million, I would put money into. And then the other thing, of course, is if I had anything left over, or I would keep some left over, I would just go much faster with Tellimer because
Yeah, yeah,
we could hire a load more engineering power and data science power because there's a huge amount of information that's already there that is in the wrong shape, in the wrong place, in the wrong time. Just the basics, we could make life a lot better and a lot easier and save people time and aggro.
yeah, yeah. And my final question really is, what would you leave the people listening to this, watching this, a couple of tips for business? What sort of tips could you give, virtually any business person to think about?
I mean, there are lots of better, more accomplished business people out there than me, but um, I suppose there are three things. One is, make sure you have the vision and and the clarity and the focus, like I was saying before.
Yeah.
And then the next two are control your costs and manage cash, like cash, cash, cash.
Hmm.
When you are setting up a business, you must care about cash, not P&L, not anything else. It's all about cash.
Cash, all about the cash.
And
Absolutely.
it is so obvious, but I've got people I've come across who have got brilliant ideas. They're brilliant at what they do. They can make their clients incredibly happy, but they don't manage the process of just the mechanics of making the cash arrive, which is a sales process, which is a contract process, which is a relationship management process, which is a finance and a invoicing process. All that stuff is boring. It's frustrating. It's kind of the last list
Yeah,
of
but
things you
it's a
really
must
want
do,
to
isn't it?
talk about. You want to be coming up with great ideas and doing fancy things, but it's like must happen
Yeah.
every
It's like
day,
forgetting to collect
must happen.
oxygen.
Yeah, exactly. Ops never stops.
Yeah, no,
Must not stop.
absolutely. So, Duncan, it's been fascinating, absolutely interesting. I knew it would be good, but you took me in areas I never expected. Absolutely brilliant. So, I just want to say thank you very much for your time.
Well, sorry, always a pleasure and good luck, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks very much.